was my baptism into the world of sharks. And we moved in from Durban down to Cape Town. So we moved right from the north in the tropics, subtropics, down to Cape Town, which is temperate. It's a Mediterranean temperate environment. And when we got to Cape Town, we moved to a place called Somerset West, which overlooked False Bay. My father made a lot of money, and we lived in a really nice neighborhood, and it overlooked False Bay. And my dad went and he bought himself a fishing skiff, well, quite a decent boat, had a nice cabin on it. It was 20 feet long, or around about 6 meters in length. And it was called Katana. Well, he named it Katana because he had a motorcycle shop, a Suzuki motorcycle shop. And at that time, the Suzuki Katana came out. So he named his boat Katana. And it was a green Robcraft with a cabin on the front and 2 outboards on the back. And we started going out into False Bay fishing. But before we get there, we went out fishing. So we started going out into False Bay, and False Bay was teeming with fish. But my father heard about this guy called Arthur Ridgway, but they called him Art. And down in the Strand, now, so you had Somerset West up on the hill, the Beverly Hills, kind of area. And then down, you had Gordons Bay and you had the Strand area, which is very nice, but, we overlooked it. And Arthur owned a dilapidated, derelict barn, 1 street from the beach. And it was called Artsmart. And he sold all sorts of crap there. I mean, that was his thing. He bought and sold stuff. So you could walk in, and Artsmart, okay, so my dad hears about this guy, Arthur Ridgway, that has been in the Strand area, in the False Bay area for many, many years. And he's the guy to go talk to about fishing equipment and where to go find the fish and blah, blah, blah. He's the expert. So one Saturday morning, my dad and I drive down and we find Artsmart, and it's a beautiful sunny day, and you can smell the sea air coming off the ocean. It's a slight onshore wind. It's beautiful, and it's sunny, and it's incredible. It's just life. So we stop the car and we climb out the car. And by that time, I am now 12 years old. I'm 12 years old. And there's 3 of us. It's myself, my 2 sisters. So I hang out with my dad all the time. All right. So him and I are best mates. So we walk across the road and we walk into this place called Artsmart. And it's got these 2 big wooden doors that are sort of lazily leaning out onto the pavement. And we walk in there, and to the left as you walk in, there's a table and a couple of chairs, and there's a little money box there that's open with, a couple of bucks in it. And there's nobody else to see. So my dad shouts, "Hello, hello." And we hear nothing. This place is quite big. We don't hear anything. So my dad says, "Hello," again. And from somewhere in the back of this place, and this Artsmart, this is exactly how it looks. It looks like a dump truck took all sorts of shit. Nuts, bolts, old furniture, vacuum machines, paintings, pots, pans, farm utensils. It looked like everybody had thrown it into the back of the truck, and the truck had reversed into Artsmart and just dumped it. I mean, this place was a fucking mess. So from back of Artsmart, we hear this gruff voice. Hey, no need a shot, no need a shot. You're going to wake up the goddamn dead. And my dad looks at me with a smile on his face. And anyway, so next thing, this big burly guy, he's older than my father. I mean, I don't know, he's probably 10 years older than my father, but this big burly guy in rough clothing, and he looks like a mess. But anyway, he comes out there and he's got this big mop of hair and this beard and his piercing eyes, and he's got his spectacles hanging off the end of his nose. Yeah. And he's similar size to my dad. He's not as big. He's fat. Okay? But my dad's big. My dad's, like I say, 250, 260 pounds. What's that, 130 kilos. And he's got these piercing blue eyes. And he's a presence. So Art comes walking out there and says, and he walks up and he sees me, my dad and myself standing there. And he walks up to my father. And he looks down at me like this. And he's got this big beard, like I say, and this mop of hair. And it's like part of his face sticking out of all this hair and stuff. He looks at me, looks at my dad. And he stares at my father for a while, like this. He stares at, like he's trying to decide if he likes us or not. And eventually a smile breaks on his face. He sticks out his hand. And he's a big boy. He sticks out his hand. My name's Art Ridgway. My dad grabs his hand, shakes his hand, looks at me. I put my hand into this, it's not a hand, it's a mitt. I mean, it's just callous and it's hard and it's a mitt. And he grabs my hand and he shakes my hand and he says, "What's your name, young man?" And I say, my name's Craig. "Well, good to meet you." And he looks at my dad, he says, "What can I do you for?" So my father says, "Well, I've been told that you're the guy that knows about fishing around here. And you got all the tackle, you got fishing tackle. Your name comes up all the time. I want to talk to you about fishing." And he looks at my father and he says, "You're not from around here?" My dad says, "No, just come down from Durban. I'm a Durban boy." And Art says, "Ah, okay." So he says, "You want to talk about fishing?" My father says, "Yeah, I want to talk to you about fishing." So Art walks up to the entrance and he's got this chain. He picks this chain up and he pulls the chain over and he hooks it across the entrance of his place. And it's got a sign that says, "Closed," hanging on it. So my dad says, "No, you don't have to close. It's not necessary to close the place." And Art says, "If we're going to talk fishing or fucking, the place is closed." So my dad laughs and, obviously I break out in a smile. Anyway, we go and we sit down and he says, come. So he's obviously taken a liking to my father. And my father was like that. He was one of these guys that had such a presence about him that you were either intimidated immediately or you liked him immediately. There was no middle road. And Arthur obviously liked my father straight away. So we go sit down. At his desk that was on the left-hand side as we walked into Artsmart. And Arthur goes and sits down in this old leather chair. It looks like it used to be a good chair, expensive chair, maybe in a lawyer's office or something like that. And he flops down into the chair, and there's 3 or 4 chairs in front of the desk. So I sit down on one, my dad sits down, and then Arthur says, whoa, hang on. Says, "You want some rum? And my father says to him, "No, not now. I don't feel like any rum right now, thank you." Arthur laughs. He says, "Well, I'm also trying to give up the habit, but I like my rum." So my dad says, no, I'm good with the rum right now. I mean, this is like 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning. So he says, you want some coffee? Says to my dad, you want some coffee? And he looks at me, you want some coffee, young man? And I'm like, yes, thanks, Uncle Art. Uncle Arthur, I say. And he says, just call me Art. So I look at my dad because I'm not used to just calling, on first name basis. So my dad, he just looks at me, he doesn't say anything. So I decide, no, it's Uncle Art. So I call him Uncle Art. Anyway, so he clambers up out of this expensive chair, boils some water, throws it in, puts the cups down on the table, puts the coffee down, the sugar down, puts the cream down, and we make our coffee. And next thing, my father and Arthur, Uncle Art, are talking about fishing. And he says to my dad, but, he asked my dad, where you from, what you doing? And my dad said, well, I was up in Durban, and then blah, blah, blah. Long story. I'm not going to tell you that whole story. Okay, anyway. So he says to my dad, where are you living? My dad says, we live up in Helderview, which in English is clear view. And he says to my dad, that's a good neighborhood, a nice neighborhood you're living in. My dad says, well, that's where we live. So they start talking fishing. But I've heard about the Submarine now. My dad's not that interested in sharks, in catching sharks anymore. He just wants to know where the edible fish are. But I'm just cooking over. I want to know about these great white sharks that I've heard about, and wherever you go in the Strand, and I mean, the Strand is a place where, on any given day, you'll see a rusted pickup truck pulling a 20 or 25 foot fishing skiff behind it, and on the back of the pickup truck are these hard-boiled commercial fishermen, kind of guys that would just as well fillet a man as they would fillet a fish. Hard-boiled, tough guys, just as rusty as the pickups they sit in the back of. So this is like a fishing place. This is a fishing town. And anyway, so I'd heard the Submarine, this Submarine and Spotty keeps coming up. So anyway, my dad and Uncle Arthur are talking. So eventually I managed to get a word in sideways. And I say, Uncle Arthur. And he says, yes, boy. I say, have you ever heard of the Submarine? And he says, yep, I heard of the Submarine. And I said to him, have you ever heard of the shark Spotty? And he says, yes, Spotty. I've heard of Spotty as well. And I said, do they really exist? And he says, well, first of all, Spotty and the Submarine are the same shark. So I said, what do you mean? He says, well, people get confused. And then he explained that Spotty had these white marks on the head before the dorsal fin. And he said, people call it Spotty and some people call it Submarine. And most people think it's two different sharks. And he said, but it's the same shark, Spotty and Submarine. But he says, most people call it the Submarine. So I said to him, have you ever seen it? And he says, I saw it once briefly. I think I saw it once briefly. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I was out with a cat called Tuckies. Now, Uncle Arthur, anybody that was known in the bay as a big-time fisherman, a game fisherman, was a cat. And he says, I was out with this cat, Tuckies, once. And he says, we were fishing, and he had a shark line out, a big shark line out. And he says, about 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, this big shark came. And he says, the shark was probably 20 feet long. And I said, was it the Submarine? He says, well, I think it was the Submarine. It looked like the Submarine. It had the marks on the head. But I'd say it was 20 feet long. And I said, yeah, but I've been told that it's 30 feet long and 35 feet long. And he said, no, my boy, Submarine's 20 feet long, 19, 20 feet long. He said, there's no bigger shark. There's no shark that's ever come into this bay that's more than 20 feet long. And he said, in any case, so Takis hooks this shark. And he says to me, I don't like catching sharks. They're a pain in the ass. He says, I like catching edibles, stuff I can bring back and eat and sell. That's what I want to bring back. I'm not interested in hooking sharks. And he says, so Taki hooks the shark because he wants to catch great white sharks. And the bay is crawling with great white sharks. There's plenty of great white sharks out there. And he says, he hooks this thing, and 9 o'clock that night, I just had enough because we were fighting the shark until 9 o'clock that night, and I was tired and I wanted to go home. I took a knife and I just cut the line. And he says, and since that day, Takis and I have never spoken again. So I'm like, Jesus, this is quite a story. So I say to him, and has anybody else hooked the submarine? Or he says, yeah, Donnie Skuman. He's hooked the submarine. The submarine almost sank his boat, put a hole in his boat. He hooked it with drums. The submarine swam under his boat, and one of the drums hit the boat, put a big hole like this into it. He almost sank. It was a wooden boat. He almost sank. He almost died out there. And he says, and Mace, Big Mace, they call him Stumbo. Stumbo also hooked the submarine. He was out after a couple of times, but Stumbo almost took his boat down. She was out there on a 16-foot boat, small boat, stupid as hell, and the submarine almost took him down, and that was the last time he tried to hunt the submarine. So I said, so are you sure it's like not bigger than 20 feet? And he said, my boy, there's not one shark in this bay that's bigger than 20 feet, that's longer than 20 feet. I'm telling you that. Anyway, so that's how I heard about the submarine. And I was kind of deflated. I was disappointed because I wanted the submarine to be 40 feet long. I wanted the submarine to be 50 feet long, as big as everybody had been telling me how big the shark is. So anyway, my father and Uncle Arthur, they became big mates. They became fishing buddies. And we then, he used to come onto our boat. And he was a nutcase. I mean, this big, burly guy, and he used to drive. And he had money. He was rich. He was a rich man. I mean, he had properties all over the place. Artsmart was just his hobby. And blah, blah, blah. So he started fishing with us. He went out fishing, and every time we stopped him, we put the anchor down. Uncle Arthur would stand up and he'd say, in the name of the Father, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Mackerel, may we catch many fish today, And he was just a crazy guy and entertaining. And anyway, so him and my dad became big friends. They became huge friends. And I was 12 years old at that time. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to continue after, because it's a long story, but it's a beautiful story.